Hey class, Kristen here. This is a demo overview intro to Toon Boom Harmony. Here is our default new scene. Make sure it's at 24 frames per second and it's being saved to your external hard drive. First, we're going to explore the brush tool. We have one default drawing layer already set up. If I deselect, you see there's nothing here. So I can select this empty frame and just start drawing with the brush. And now we have a little piece of paper there. Each notch here represents a frame of time. So if we're at 24 frames per second, and then one of these lighter gray boxes represents a piece of paper, like when we did the flipbook assignment on the index cards. So here's one piece of paper, here's a second one. I can turn on onion skin and trace over that. My pen has sensitivity on it, which is why I can get a varying amount of thickness. But of course, I can also go into my tool properties for the brush, and I can play with the line weight. I can even choose a new textured brush. And if I go into this arrow, I get even more textures that I can overlay and start creating custom brushes. So I'm going to turn off onion skin for now. You see I have these two distinct drawings. Here's the second one, here's the first one I made. And we're just making some brush strokes. Now, let's just switch to the pencil right now. Pencil tool properties, you get the same kind of choices. You get some textures as well here. Let's see, we've got a charcoal. Oh, that's not really doing much. We can also come up to this arrow, click on textures. Maybe we can apply some of these bitmap textures here. Let's try this. Okay, so make a couple strokes with your pencil. Again, you can play with size. And if your pen has sensitivity, you can also use that to control the width of the line. Now here is the big difference between a brush and a pencil line in Harmony. Let's go over to this black arrow. It's called the Select tool. If you just draw right through one of the strokes, here's my pencil strokes. You can see that I'm selecting each individual stroke, and also it looks like there's a spine that goes right down the center of the stroke. If I try to select a brush stroke, I don't get a spine. I see like more like an outline. It's outlining the entire shape. Go to this white arrow tool. It's called the contour editor, and select the pencil stroke again. Now you can see these little, I don't know if they're called vertices, these little points on the pencil stroke, and we can move them around. What this means is that after you have made a line, a mark with your pencil, you can change the direction of it after the fact with this white arrow tool. So if you drew and maybe your hand is a little shaky, you can smooth it out. We can change those smooth settings in the pencil tool. Let's go back here. See, you've got center line smoothing. Or you can take this contour editor and you can just push these vertices around a little bit just to make your line more exact. If you hold down Option and click on one of those vertices, you get these green dots that appear. And these dots are like little handles that allow you to create bezier curves. So I can just click on one normally and it moves around. I can grab these handles. If I click on Option, if I Option click, then it just, those handles disappear. I get a sharp point If I Option drag on one of them, then I get those handles, and then I can move it around. If I want to move one handle at a time, I just hit Option again, and then I can break the link between the two sides. So let's take this contour editor, look at a brush stroke now. Here. We see it doesn't go through the center of the stroke. Instead, it outlines this stroke. So if we try moving one of these vertices, we're changing the whole mass of this stroke. It's got a texture on it, so it's spreading out the texture as it goes. But this makes it harder to kind of change the actual construction of the marking, because if I made it with a brush stroke, I'm essentially creating a shape as opposed to a pencil stroke, which is really like a line. It's got a little spine with a texture on top of it. Now, the thing with brush strokes, I mentioned before, you can make brush strokes, and then when you select them, they're separate. This can be a little weird. This can feel a little bit weird, because if you were doing something a little bit more painterly, you might not have a need to be able to control each and every stroke. If you're trying to build up to a mass or like a textured sort of dynamic line. So under the brush tool properties, we can turn on a button that will merge all the brush strokes together, more like Photoshop. So it's this button here. It's called Flatten Artwork, Auto Flatten. Turn that on. Now make some brush strokes. And then if we come back to this selection arrow, now we can see it all moves as one large shape, and I no longer have the flexibility to individually select each stroke. With a pencil, though, I'll always be able to select each one individually. So that's the difference between a brush and a pencil line. Now, look at these two flowers down here. Here's a gray one, here's a blue one. We're on the gray right now. The gray shows you a low resolution version of what you're drawing. So these textures are not actually what it's going to look like when it's fully rendered out. So to know that, we are going to switch to this blue flower view to then get the final high res quality of the image. So if we do that, go to the render view. Now, in theory, you would be able to see all those beautiful textures I put on my charcoal pencil line and all those feathering textures on my brush. We can't see anything right now, and there's a very simple reason for that. There is currently no color in the scene, and we drew everything in black. So when you're drawing in black over no color, it's going to render as black. So let's come back to this gray sort of lower quality preview setting. And what we need to do is add a background color so that when we render it, we'll be able to see what's happening. So we're going to add a color card. Let's go to this plus sign. You're going to click and hold that down until a menu pops up, and then just select color card. Now, sometimes this might happen to you where it just decided to link itself to my drawing layer. We don't want that right now. Sometimes I find that either the stylus is super sensitive or Harmony is super sensitive, and sometimes I just might make a little movement with my pen or the mouse, and Harmony does something I didn't mean for it to do. So I do not want this color card to be attached to the drawing. So the easiest way to unattach them is to pull them away from each other, and let's reorder them. Pull this color card down. There we go. This is what you want to be able to see. Now we have this by default white color card, and if we go to the flower view, there we go. Now we can see what we've been drawing. So go back to the gray view. Let's change the color on the color card. Double click this little sunburst icon. A window will pop up. go down to below where it says alpha channel, which means transparency. Just click on this color bar. Another menu will come up, and you might see this multi-window mode, or you might see this single wheel mode. You can swap between the two depending on how you like to work. So let's just pick a new color for our background, and then we can close that window and then close this window. Okay, now if we go to the blue flower, we can see we've got our background color, and now we can see what our final texture is going to look like. Let's change this to 100%, and now here's what my charcoal texture on the pencil is going to look like. Here's what my brush texture is going to look like. Here's how it's going to look like because I stretched it out. So it's always good to periodically check in the final render view just to see how your art is going to be rendered out of Harmony. But you don't really want to work in this blue flower mode. It's just quicker and better to be working in this gray flower. It'll let you preview your animation. The blue flower, it doesn't play back at all. So for any kind of playback, you want the gray. I'm going to hit 1 on the keyboard to zoom out. 2 is what zooms in, and spacebar lets me drag around. I'm also going to turn on this little mask, and it'll show me exactly what my camera is seeing, even while I'm in the gray flower view. Okay, let's add some colors. Let's talk about colors. So in Harmony, you have to think about these colors as actual little buckets of paint, little pots of paint that you prepare and you carry over to your easel, and those are the paints that you have to paint with. In other words, you need to set up your colors first before you can use them. So let's add some more colors. I'm going to hit this plus sign here in the color palettes section, and it's going to add a new color swatch. Double click the color part and start picking the colors for your scene. So I'm going to be animating a little ball character, so this color will be my outline. And then I'll make another swatch. This one, I like this one, will be my ball fill. I'm going to change this to say ball outline. All right. Let's say my ball has a face on it too. I'm going to make a color for the face. Double click that to change the actual color. Let's do this. All right. If you had a character in your scene and your character had clothes, you would make individual colors for each piece of your character. So let's say the ball has a shirt, and that shirt is going to be this color. And the ball has pants. So in Harmony, you want to be as specific as possible because this gives you greater flexibility later on. So I would make a color for every single piece of my character in the scene. If I was doing shadows and highlights, I would make individual color swatches for those shadows and highlights. So let's take our ball outline color. Let's come to our timeline. Let's create a new blank drawing here. There's 3 ways you can do this. You can always right click, which is the bottom button on your stylus, come up to drawings, create empty drawing. Here, let's just label that. Yay. All right, another way you can do it is to look for the button here in your toolbar, create empty drawing. It looks like this. Great. And now the third way to create an empty drawing is to memorize this shortcut. It's Shift+Option+R. And that creates a new drawing. Shift+Option+R. This is a very random hotkey combination, but some of the logic behind Harmony is trying to be as efficient as possible. So if I'm drawing with my right hand, my left hand is typing all of the keyboard shortcuts. So Shift Option R, you know, they're more or less in the same area of the keyboard. And so I just kind of keep my hand there and it ends up being easy. I have to admit, you know, the hotkeys aren't always very intuitive to memorize. And so just like anything else, muscle memory, just like all the time it takes, it will eventually become second nature, but it is a little bit tough to get started. Now I've got a number of drawings here on my timeline. If I want to step between them, it's going to be the comma and period on the keyboard. Period goes forward, comma goes backwards, so that's going to be pretty helpful. And now, if we want to add exposures to these drawings, in other words, these drawings are on ones right now, let's make them on twos. An easy way to do that is to just select the drawing that you want to extend and then just hit the plus sign. And so do you see how now I've extended this to frame 5? So I can select the next drawing, plus sign, extend it out to frame 10, so on and so forth. Now the minus key will do the same. It'll subtract exposures. So now I can set all these drawings to be on 4s just by subtracting one. So plus sign. So imagine that flipbook assignment that we did in Dragon Frame, and I asked you to hand in a version on 1s and on 2s and on a mix. If only Dragon Frame's hotkeys was as easy as this, adding and deleting exposures. This is very easy. A note, I'm using the plus and minus keys on this number pad. If you have an extended keyboard, you have that special little number pad all the way at the end. So that plus and minus is easiest to use. Otherwise, if you use the plus and minus in the main keyboard, I have to actually hit Shift plus or Shift equals sign on the main keyboard to activate that plus sign. And then the negative sign on the regular keyboard is just the key next to it, just the negative key. Okay, now go to your library window. I want to point out this drawing substitution window. I'm going to press this arrow so it can temporarily hide some of the things going on here. And then I can also drag this out. Okay, so let's go to a blank frame. It has no drawings on it, so frame 20. In my drawing substitution window, while I'm on this drawing layer, if I move this little slider, I can actually cycle through all the drawings I made. And I can swap one in at frame 20. See? So this was the second drawing I made. It's called Drawing 2. But at any point in my timeline, I can swap in any other drawing that I've already created, and I can just plop it in. So here's drawing 1, and it's happening at frame 30, it's happening at frame 25, it's happening at frame 20, it's also happening from frames 1 to 4. So what this means is if I go to my colors, 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 if Let's just make a mark here. If I mark my drawing number 1 anywhere it appears in my timeline on this layer, any updates I make to it will be reflected wherever this drawing exists in the timeline. So let me undo that and show you how to duplicate a drawing instead. So if I wanted a red X on frame 1 and I want frame 25 to have similar artwork to frame 1 but with no red X, I need to duplicate this. So in my drawing substitution window, right, this is called drawing number 1. Let's duplicate this. I'm going to right click, go to drawings, and duplicate drawings. Do you see what just happened? Nothing really appears to have happened in this window, but in drawing substitution, it actually created a duplicate of drawing number 1. It's now called drawing number 6. So if I come back to drawing number 1, here also at frame 1, and I make a giant red X, we don't see an X here anymore because the X is only on drawing number 1, not drawing number 6. And here's drawing number 1 again. So I want you to go to this plus sign here. Anytime you see a plus sign, there's a menu in there. So this one you don't have to click and hold for some reason. This is the only one where it seems to want you to click and hold. But let's show the XSheet for a minute. This should look familiar to working in DragonFrame. So here's what's happening. These represent the different drawings. This represents my timeline. Here's the number of frames I have in my timeline. Here are the drawings. And here's where I started substituting them at different points in the timeline. Here's where I made a duplicate. I could even come in here and I can type in the number of the drawing that I want, 5, enter, and here we go. We have 5, drawing number 5 showing up here. And then if I delete this drawing, you see it only deleted it from this frame. It didn't delete the number 5 drawing here. And if I go back to library to see my drawing substitution window, I switch this all the way over to the left. It doesn't erase the drawing. It just removed it from my frame because the drawing number 5, it still exists here. Let's just add a few more drawing layers first. So let's go to this plus sign. Let's add drawing layer. Let's say we're going to do our character animation on this layer. Don't do add and close, just do add. Keeps the window open. You can keep adding layers here. So let's say we'll have a character happening, we'll have a background, and then we'll have some foreground action. Now we can add and close. So we've got all these layers here. I'm going to move this between. And we can turn on this light table. This is like the light tracer that you used, and it will fade out all of the layers in the back just to give you a little bit more clarity. And then where is the colors? Here we go. All right, let's just say there's some greenery happening in the foreground. And I want to extend this to the full length of my scene. Let's say my scene ends at 30 frames. I can do the plus sign all the way, plus, 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 or I can go to my end frame, select that frame, and then hit F5 on the keyboard. And F5 will automatically fill everything in between. Or, because there's like always 3 ways to do something in Harmony, I can select arrange, which is to click and drag some empty frames, and then I come find this button and it will fill it in. Essentially, it will extend the exposure. Okay, at this point, let's do a command save and let's go to the Finder. So here we are in the Finder, and here is the Harmony project folder. Inside, we have the Harmony project file, .xstage, and then we've got all these different folders here. If we look inside Elements, these folders represent the drawing layers we made. If we twirl these down even more, you'll see there's this TVG file, .tvg. It shows you how many drawings you made in each layer. So in the foreground, we only made one drawing here, right? But let's look at this drawing layer. Let's turn that down. Yeah, we made 6 layers, 6 different drawings here. So everything you do in Harmony is being saved somewhere in the background on your hard drive. So this is just so you know what's happening. It's also important to keep everything in its own little folder. Everything is inside here. Um, and this is just part of that digital hygiene, you know. Make sure you know where you're saving to before you start Harmony, and then always just keep saving as you go along. Okay, one more note about the colors. I didn't finish before I moved on. Let's say we've got our character, we've got ball outline. Here, let us switch to another easier to see. Let's just switch to blank background. Okay, here we go. Select the character layer, the drawing, your first drawing on your character layer with the right color. So here's our outline. Let's fill it in. Okay, that's going to give me a ghosting edge, which I'm not really crazy about, but we'll come to that. This gives me a ghosting edge, so I'm going to undo that for now. And then I'm going to utilize these sublayers. These are called art layers. L stands for line, C stands for color. You might have some extra ones showing. O stands for overlay, U stands for underlay. These are sublayers of our character layer. So what people like to do is keep their line art separate from the fill or the color. And this will help us prevent some of what you're seeing here. So the way to do that is to make sure you're on the L sublayer, and then we're going to look for this button here. This will copy the contour and on down one level onto the color layer. So one way to see that easier, we're in the camera view now. Let's just go over to the drawing view. Let's simplify things a little bit. The drawing view is much different from the camera view. It'll basically only show you one drawing at a time. You can still use onion skin here, but you'll see it behaves a little bit differently than out in the camera view. The drawing view can also be helpful just to isolate what's happening on your sublayers. So if I select this, right, here's the contour. Now if I select the C layer, it's because I had already used this button. I copied the contour of my marking here from the line art layer down to the color layer. If you're not seeing this thin blue line, just press K. K means show strokes. So if you go up to View, Show Strokes, K, that's what's happening. So a stroke is an invisible line, but you can color and fill it in. So let's fill this. You see that little blue outline? I'm going to turn it off now, hitting K. And if I turn on this eye, it'll now show me here is my line overlaid on top of this color art. I don't get that weird ghosting anymore. And this is all sublayer action happening on this one character layer. So let's come back out and continue with our character. Ball face. I'm going to want to make sure that face is happening on my line layer. That's just how I want to organize it. And then let's draw in that shirt. I'll keep it on the line layer also. And then pants. All right. Now, let's say we wanted to color in the shirt with the same color, but just a solid, right? This is going to happen again, so we need to do the same thing as before and use these sublayers. So, with making sure you're on the L line art layer, come up to this button, create color art from line art. Let's do it again. Let's see it better in the drawing view. I'm going to turn off this eyeball so I can isolate it. And I'm going to turn on K to show strokes, and we'll see what happened. It just copied the stroke of my outline, copied it down one sub-layer level to this color art sublayer. Now I can color it in as a solid color, and let's see the whole thing combined. That's what it's looking like. So now I have this little feathered edge happening. And it looks like that when combined into my whole scene. What's nice about this color art layer is that you can start adding things like shadows, highlights. So let me just show you quickly. Let's duplicate this shirt color. We're going to call it shirt highlight. Highlight. And then let's change this to just a brighter color. Now, what I want to do is for that highlight to exist on my color layer, but I need to draw an invisible line so that I can fill in that shape as the highlight shape. So inside the paint bucket tool, we have a stroke tool. If you select that, you can treat this like an invisible line. And I can just draw in the shape of my highlight. So let's say this character is backlit. So the shoulders are going to have this yellow color. Let me show you here. Let's just isolate the color layer. Now I can come in with the shirt highlight, go back to the paint bucket, just fill that in. And if I turn off the strokes by hitting K, right, now I get this seamless color block while being able to keep my textured outline around it. So I can do the same with the head. I'm going to duplicate this swatch. Let's give it a highlight. And a little warmer. It'll be okay. All right, and then make sure you label it so you don't get confused. So ball, highlight. And then I'm going to draw with the stroke tool. I'm going to draw that invisible border. I'm still on my color art layer here. Draw that invisible border. Now, it says, sometimes you might get this message, you have added a stroke to the drawing, but it will not be visible until you activate Show Strokes. So that's what we've been doing by pressing K. So if I press K, then, okay, here is the stroke. I can see it. Now I can paint bucket it like any other shape with the highlight. There we go. So come back to camera. Here is our lovely backlit character. Now just remember what sublayer you're on. I'm just going to set myself back to this line. And also I'll turn off strokes, turn off K. But here we are. Now that I see this character coming together, I actually want to change the color of the face. So I'm going to come. Here's like one of the amazing, just like strengths of Harmony. Because I was specific with what I named my colors and what I use them for, I can come in after the fact and change the color, and it will automatically update in my scene. I don't have to erase and redo things with a new color. So what this means is if someday you're working for a client and they change their mind, because clients always change their mind and they're allowed to because they're paying you, and all of a sudden they don't want a mustard green shirt, they want a bright Kelly green shirt, this is fine. You don't have to lose sleep over it, literally, because if you were organized about painting all your drawings with the correct shirt color, all you have to do is just come back in there and change it to the color that they're asking for. Anything, really. So this is what makes Harmony such a powerful tool for animators. Here, let's do this. Now, I want to mention one more thing. Let's extend this character's exposure to our scene. Our scene is now 40 frames long. I'm going to do this fast. Select frame 40 and then fill it in with F5. And let's see. Let's have these drawings cycling in the back. So here's a great and very efficient way to create cycles now. Because if you have them in the drawing substitution window, you can literally just swap between them. I'm going to fill this in with this button here. Let's go to drawing substitution. Let's fill it in with drawing number 6. What did that happen? There we go. I just had to do that twice because for some reason it didn't happen the first time. And then I can also hit the plus sign. Oh, actually I don't want to hit the plus sign. The plus sign is going to move everything down. Let's not do that. I am just going to use this. I have to select them all and then use this. Select all these. Select all these. So I have this kind of not so cycle happening in the background, but as you can see, it's pretty easy to do. Another way to do it is to just extend all of this out to frame 40, F5, and then come back in here and then just substitute the drawings as they go. Okay, it's not happy with me. It's not taking effect. Let's try using the XSheet. Okay, let's try typing it in here. There we go. Let's try drawing substitution. There we go. Okay. Now we have this background cycling. And the reason why my character, even though it should be on top, it's faded, it's because we turned on our light disk, our little light table. So we turn that off. Now our character is in the foreground. The background's changing behind them. Now, one more thing before we go to export this. I want to show you the difference between this selection arrow and the animation tool to transform. So this is pretty self-explanatory. This should feel familiar. You can reshape the size of your artwork or whatever you selected. I missed one here. I'm just going to shift select that. Now it's all together. Move that back closer here. Okay, yeah, so just select everything with the selection tool. I can move it. I can change it. And anything I do to the drawing, it will take effect anywhere else that drawing is used. Okay, so this is just sort of acting pretty normally. Now, there's an animation tool that we can animate these transformations, kind of like what we did in After Effects, but you need to use a different tool to do that. Make sure your little animation button is turned on. It's this little yellow running person. Underneath that is going to be our animation tool, this transform tool. If you have keyframes turned on, this animation tool. So again, by default, if you make an adjustment, since we started with the default window, you'll see it created a little keyframe here. So I can squash this and basically animate it. But you see, it's affecting all the drawings on this layer. So let's make it go super wide now. So despite the fact that I came into the drawings and I was resizing things around here, this is the individual drawing. I was resizing it with the black arrow. But if I resize it with this animation tool, with this actual transform tool, it will affect everything on the layer. What this means is that it's created a motion keyframe. In After Effects, we call this a linear keyframe. And it is transforming everything. It's making everything wide, regardless of the drawings that are switching and substituting underneath. So we can have it squash back like this. So it stretches out and then it stretches back in. So I can put keyframes on top of drawn animation, and you can kind of begin to see where we might be headed with the ability to do this. All right. For now, let's just export. So we'll go up to File, Export, Movie. And here, we'll change it to QuickTime Movie. We'll make sure it's saved to our project folder. We'll make sure it has a name that makes sense. We'll call this Harmony Test. And I'm just going to save it into my folder. And yep, make sure that's 1920 by 1080. Let's see, we only animated 40 frames, so I'm going to change this to 40. Otherwise, it'll give me a bunch of black at the end, which I don't need. Oh, let's change this back to QuickTime Movie. I don't know why it changed that. Go down to Movie Options. Here's where we'll make sure it's Apple ProRes 422HQ. And then we'll hit OK. And there we have it.